It's a tough topic, but it's a very important topic for the news organization. So maybe the first question on this is give us a definition of fake news. Maybe we'll start with Gary. So how do you define fake news?
It's an easy one to start with, thanks. How about this? Instead of just defining what fake news is, let me list off 3 reasons why fake news exists, okay? And all of these 3 reasons, I believe, are actually interconnected. The first one is that the internet has been great for so many things. And most importantly, in my mind, it's for the democratization of knowledge. Effectively, what I mean is that anyone in the world who has access to the internet ostensibly has access to the same information. But what that has done is that it has removed the idea of having arbiters and gatekeepers of truth. Because now it is whoever screams the loudest is the one that has the most credibility or authority. Okay? And that is a very, very dangerous thing. So I think that's the first problem, is that the internet has fundamentally changed what we deem to be true, or how we classify truth. The second is the economic model of the internet, which we talked about backstage, is that the economic model of the internet incentivizes things that get a lot of clicks and a lot of views. Yeah. And so it is actually misaligned with the amount of energy that it takes to create quality content, especially in the news world. So the business model, the economics of the internet is broken. And then the third thing is that, and this is where the news organizations need to be held accountable, is that over the course of the last 20-some years, as the internet has developed around us, we have either not developed with it, or more importantly, we have not actually impacted its development. Which means that we have allowed the internet to break apart the structure of news, which has created a degrading level of media literacy. So consumers now don't know the difference between truth and not truth, right? And it's as simple as not knowing the difference between front page news and opinion and commentary, okay? So these 3 things, when we have internet that doesn't have stewardship of truth, when we have economic model that is broken, and we have degrading literacy, it's the reason why we have fake news.
Yeah, I think these are the 3 important areas. And also, in an age where everyone is a media company, everyone can publish news, it's challenging.
Yeah. Sure. I'll just add to what Gary had to say. So it's driven by a couple of objectives. It's driven because of political reasons. It's driven because of religious reasons. But typically, there is a agenda behind it to drive fake news. And then there are some middlemen who drive it from a monetization reason, which is another important aspect of why it propagates. Has fake news existed since time existed? Probably yes. But over the last few years, it has taken a very different proportion. It has grown in size and number. Probably because everyone is a media. Everyone can speak out. And the social platforms have given them the power to distribute their thoughts at a scale which never could happen largely before. And I think that's primarily the differentiation. Now, is it good or bad? It's something we'll go into those details probably later, but that's what I think. It's typically driven by agenda. It has existed for a long time. The scale in the last few years has been very different, but it's something I think which I am at least very optimistic that in the next 5 years we'll have a solution.
5 years, a solution. That's really optimistic. Share with us your observations, especially in terms of incentives, because as Gary has rightly pointed out, the internet is providing a kind of screwed incentive for people to put out something in exchange for clicks. Yeah. And I think that's the business model for some kind of a fake news.
Yeah, so the business model we have right now on the web is based on ad impressions. So basically, you are incentivized to just optimize for volume. Yeah. And I believe this business model, as you said, is fundamentally broken because it sets the wrong incentives. If you are being rewarded to just optimize for volume and not necessarily for truth, then financially it doesn't make any sense to really put a lot of effort, a lot of resources into actually researching great content, developing high quality journalism, because if all you need is create a lot of buzz and then you get a lot of traffic, that's strictly financially speaking a much smarter decision. So what we need is a different way how content on the web should be monetized, because the current advertising model is clearly broken. We have basically an oversupply of available ad impressions on the internet, which means for years prices have been decreasing. So websites are forced to compensate those decreasing revenues by allowing more and more aggressive ads on their site. And that has created this downward spiral in which ads are becoming more and more aggressive, at the same time less and less valuable for publishers. So if you don't have to spend a lot of resources on creating the content, you have a competitive advantage. So we need to create new economics models that actually reward high quality content.
Yeah, so you also highlight one of the key challenges for the overall news industry is because if the dynamic of the business model is not changing, then there will be an undersupply of quality news because news organization cannot survive and thrive. But we are also at a stage where social media platforms are becoming ever more dominant for people to get, receive, and find news. And what should be the way we should work as a news organization with these social networks to actually help people find and discover high-quality news?
I think, let's be more specific. Let's talk about Facebook specifically as opposed to just talk about general social media, because Facebook really is the 800-pound gorilla in the room. We have to understand as news organizations that Facebook at this point is effectively unavoidable. So I don't think the argument of whether or not it's a friend or an enemy is a good use of our time. We have to figure out a way to live in the world where Facebook dominates content discovery and try and find the right partnership, try and find the right incentives, and try and find the right user experience to make this work for the news industry. I think we have a short window of time where Facebook has realized that it's not good enough for them just to say, I am a platform. Okay, they used to stick a flag in the sand and say, I am a platform, and so media literacy is not really my concern. Or combating fake news is really not my problem. But suddenly they've realized, you know what, we have an accountability, because you have a legitimate argument to say Facebook is the largest media company in the world at this point, right? Just because of the distribution. And so I think we have a short period of time as a news industry to work with them to build the right features, to build the right accountability, and to build the right future monetization channels so that we can survive together in this world. And I think that they care about that.
Yeah, there's already a North America alliance of publishers who are going to Congress for asking for permission so that they could collectively bargain with Facebook. Do you think that the rest of the world, publishers of the rest of the world, should also do the same?
I think so. I was just learning a lot about the Times Internet. Times of India. I knew that it was large. I didn't know that it was 250 million monthly active users. That makes it the largest news site on earth. And the rest of the world doesn't really know that, right? Because the way that we look at the media world is so European and American, very specifically American-centric, that we stop paying attention to the scale and the impact of news organizations outside of the Western world. And I do think that we have both an accountability and a responsibility as news organizations, not only here in Asia, here in Asia, telling the story of this part of the world to the rest of the world, to align what is right for the long term, and to participate in this conversation, and not just be bystanders and hope that they get it right.
Gautam, you at backstage, you talk a lot about WhatsApp as now a dominant place for news are being received in India. Share with us your concerns with WhatsApp as a platform, and what do you think? Because you said you are pretty optimistic that in 5 years there will be a solution to that. Why are you so optimistic in the future?
Sure. So I have already seen, at least on the Facebook and Google side of things, a lot of initiatives coming to tackle fake news. And reasonably optimistic that in the next 5 years, they'll get it right. It's a technology problem, they will be able to solve it. In terms of business, it has been a short-term gain, but in the mid to long term, I think it's all brand loss for them, which is what they will try to protect. And hopefully they'll try to preserve that. WhatsApp is a very different category. It's slightly more distributed than even a Facebook and a Google, and very difficult to have a central authority having to manage it because the content rotates through forwards, and especially if there is a vested party which is operating with a religious or a political intent, it's very difficult to control these kind of information propagation across medium like WhatsApp. I think there will be a lot of education in this particular arena. And while I'm talking of WhatsApp, my personal example, and this is something I experienced just about two weeks back. You will all agree that LinkedIn, the quality of users being a professional network, will be considered reasonably high than all other social media platforms. Yet, when there is a news or a fake news which is propagated, you will see the kind of people who are accepting and commenting on that without trying to justify or find the actual facts. So there is a lot of learning, not just on the platform, but also on the audience who has a disposition which tries to accept that bias which is being propagated through these kind of medium. I think the education across the masses is happening. It's gradually happening, and a lot of people in various groups are trying to protect and challenge whatever they believe is fake, even if they don't know it for sure. And I think that's where I have my optimism.
But is it a technology problem? Can the platforms building certain smart ways, AI, to help sort out the news and differentiate between those are fake, fabricated, and the news that actually can be verified?
I think so. I'll talk specifically to Facebook. The number of fake news articles has severely decreased, in Facebook, because of the control now they are putting. It's not zero yet, and it will not be zero till you actually get the long tail out. But they have been able to identify the sources. They have used machine learning to identify the rate of propagation. They understand the kind of audience that they are getting after, and that's where they are trying to go and block at the source, block at the monetization, where there is a semblance of reasonable control over a longer period of time.
Tell us your vision about changing the business model so that you cut off the very business models that would fuel the fake news and also give more revenue, contribute more ad revenue to reputable news organizations.
Yeah, I think we can, of course, hope that the platforms do it right, and then the discovery will solve the fake news problem itself. But I think the real core is, of course, the monetization. Because if there's a financial incentive to create fake news, there will be fake news, and they will find a way to distribute them. But what we can do is, if we create a different ecosystem that creates different financial incentives that move away from just optimizing for volume to high quality. So what we're doing at AdBlock Plus is basically two things. We're creating a new advertising ecosystem because, and I mentioned that before, the traditional advertising is failing because the prices are raised to the bottom. So we're creating a new ecosystem in which fewer but more high quality ads actually provide more value in the long run for the publishers. But also I think it is important that news will become more independent from just advertising. And of course, right now, the only alternative is to have a paywall in place. And there are only very few websites in the world that actually have that kind of brand recognition, the loyal readers, to be able to ask users to sign up. So what we are building now is a completely new way how users can pay for content on the web. It's basically the first payment system for content on the web that automatically works everywhere. So as a user, if you don't want to see any ads, you can instead pay a monthly fee, and then this money is automatically distributed to all the websites you have engaged with based on a very smart algorithm. And with that algorithm, we have the opportunity to incentivize high-quality content, because if we look for the right signals, we can make sure that high quality content is actually being rewarded, as opposed to the current ad impression based business model, which just rewards volume.
But how would you encourage people, users, to adopt your model? How would you encourage people to pay, say, $5 for really engaging high quality news?
It's of course an educational process, obviously, and it's a combination of educating people why content on the web, high quality content, should cost money, but also we can work with the right incentives, with partnerships that users get access to exclusive content without any friction, without having to sign up for individual websites. So I think, since we have the massive user base of people who use our product AdBlock Plus because they want to protect themselves from annoying ads, we really have a very unique position to, for the first time, establish something that is unrelated to advertising. It's not a paywall. It's a completely new way how content can be monetized and how high quality content actually can be rewarded.
Are you signing up with, are you working with news organizations, or you would expect just to find out those people and then send money over to them right away?
Basically the system works in a way that news websites just have to tell us where to send the money to. But
That's easy. I can give you an address. Yeah.
But of course, there's a subset of users who just agree that this is the right thing to do, and they want to support the content creators. But that will probably just be a couple of %. And if we want to then move really into the mainstream audience, we have to work on partnerships with organizations like, let's say, The Economist, that those users who are part of this system, that they will just get extra benefits like direct access to premium content without the hurdle of having to sign up for individual paywalls.
Yeah, that's interesting. Really worth paying attention. Going back to the consumers, because I think this is, the fake news is also at a stage when the younger generation are getting their news from a very different channel. And I think it's a challenge for news organizations to really build the trust in the brand, because a lot of young people would take whatever they get, whatever they are being fed at face value. So how would you, all of you had said about the education, how do you educate or engage or the younger generation, right? That's a key challenge. Otherwise, it's not that easy, right?
Educating media literacy right now is going to be extremely difficult. It's not something that the news organizations can do just on our own. The platforms have to be involved. Educators in general have to be involved. In some places, government maybe has to be involved, although that gets a little bit sketchy. I would say this, for the news organization, we have an accountability to build better user experience on digital platforms. And I think that's part of the problem. It's the fact that we have to recognize that no one reads a newspaper from front to back anymore. So the structure that we have survived on over the course of 100 years is gone. That structure actually defined what news was. When you read a newspaper from start to finish, almost every major newspaper in the world looks the same. You have front page news, you have the third page being sort of the second most important page, and then inside somewhere in that main book you have a page of what we call editorial leaders, which is what the newspaper believes is their conviction and their opinion, and then right next to it is a page of other people's opinions. And the purpose of that is to offer a more well-rounded point of view to our readers so that they can intelligently make up their own mind. When you pull that apart and no one reads the newspaper from start to finish anymore, all of that structure goes away. So suddenly, when you find an article on your Facebook newsfeed and you click into it, it could be front page news, it could be an editorial leader, or it could be opinion, and all of it looks the same to you. Right? And when you get it, when it's opinion, it's not news. It's not in and of itself factual news. It is an opinion. And then when you've normalized opinion as news, suddenly you've already broken the idea of, okay, I know what real news is supposed to look like. And now you're on a downward slope to lack of media literacy, where anything I click on, if it reiterates my own point of view, this must be true. So that is an accountability from a user experience point of view. We as the news organization has to get right, and we're just now starting to really evaluate that.
But you still need to provide them a kind of a context.
Somebody like that. A few people do.
But you still wanted people to get kind of well-rounded newsfeed, facts, opinion, your thoughts as editors, your editor's thoughts and other people's thoughts. How do you do that? Is it going to be a tailor-made experience, but still a kind of a combination of all this, or?
I'll keep this short because these two gentlemen have smarter things to say than me. Yes, what that requires is us to build credibility with our own brand, because really as a news organization, what we are selling is our brand, is us saying our brand equals truth, right? So we have to build that relationship. And second of all, we have to work with the platforms to make sure that they feel an accountability to show objectiveness in the way that discovery is done.
Right. So I'll give my couple of lines here.
Yeah.
So you have to start from the customer perspective. And in this case, if it's the millennials, you have to solve for that.
Yeah.
The brand is always important. At Times Internet, we differentiate because it's the premium users, premium brand, premium data, premium first-party data. And that's primary for us to protect and preserve. The luxury that we have is while we are not touching Times of India and Economic Times, we have the ability to do 3 different brands, which are experimenting with different formats, more video, which is the India Times, the Men's XP, the IDIVA, and going into the millennial segment as to figuring out what's the right way to approach them, engage them, if the content length is right, if the content format is right, if the distribution and discovery is right, and trying to engage them and then use that learning into our other properties. So, for millennials, the consumption is very different from where the Gen X and Gen Y had consumed that news. While you still want to preserve the brand, you'll have to do certain changes for yourself to reach the content, as you get to the millennials.
Yeah. Your 5 cents on that?
I just wanted to add that we haven't talked about the role of advertisers here. Yeah. And we talked about what platforms can do, what users can do, what the news outlets can do. But due to the rise of programmatic advertising, advertisers have basically bought the audience, not the context. And I think it's also the responsibility of the brands, of the advertisers, to take more ownership and control over where their ads appear. Because if they run ads on certain sites, they're sponsoring that site, and they have to take the responsibility to know where their ads appear and to vet those sites, so that this can be another piece of the puzzle to make fake news unviable from a financial perspective.
Yeah, but I think people are getting smarter, and I think the whole advertising world is changing so dramatically, right? What's your take on, finally, maybe we have just 30 seconds on native ads? Is it a form that advertisers would have to take quality and also where they place their ads more carefully?
Yeah, definitely. I think native advertising has one huge advantage. It blends into the site. It's less disruptive, less intrusive. So that's the positive aspect of it. I think where it's crossing the line if it's lacking transparency. Yeah. So with our acceptable ads program, we want to encourage less intrusive types of advertising, but one key component is transparency. So it is really crucial for the long-term viability of this type of ad format that users always know what is organic content, what is sponsored content, and who was it sponsored by.
Yep. We are running out of time, but I think you have some very interesting thoughts. I'm getting more upbeat about the news industry, and also I think we need to work harder to educate and engage the audience, especially the younger generation. A big applause to 3 gentlemen on the panel. Thank you.